I'm Michelle. I'm the talent director at Notion Capital, and I work with our portfolio companies and our founders on hiring, talent, organizational development, and everything in between.
I'm Rachel Turner. I'm the founder of VC Talent Lab, and we're on a mission to put leadership development and coaching at the heart of the venture ecosystem. And what that means is we help venture-backed founders become great CEOs, their teams to become high-performing, and their cultures to become thriving.
3 archetypes of the founder journey, and how they relate to start, build, and scale. So maybe start us off by describing for us what it's like being a brave warrior.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe take a couple of steps back, because there's a couple of things first. So I've been coaching for about 22 years, and the majority of that time working with entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, venture-backed founders, leaders. And in the world of leadership development, the idea of having different leadership styles or leadership archetypes is very prevalent. It's not new, and it's not a new idea. And in fact, there was some really interesting research by Harvard Business Review about 20 years ago, which basically found that CEOs who have the ability to flex their leadership style have organizations that perform best. So actually, within the corporate world, this idea of understanding your natural leadership style and understanding when it's appropriate and when to adapt it is ubiquitous. However, in the sort of founder world, it's less so. So it's just taking that idea and bringing it here. So my observation and my own lived experience, because I was a founder before I was a coach, is that there are these 3 very different styles of leadership. And you could really call them, if you wanted to use normal language rather than my language, you could call them entrepreneurial leadership. That's sort of what you need to get things going at the beginning. And I call that brave warrior. We can talk about that a bit more in a moment. Then the second style of leadership is operational leadership, which is more helpful to you as you start to grow the business. So if you think like you got off the ground and now you're trying to grow, that stage is much more helpful if you've got that operational grip. And then finally, the more traditional, if you went into a bookshop and bought a book on leadership, what you're going to find out about is C-suite leadership, traditional corporate, strategic, visionary, authoritative leadership. And so that sort of more traditional, pure leadership, strategic leadership, I call that wise monarch. So those 3 stages, 3 archetypes. And for some reason, I just find it, when you talk about a brave warrior, it just creates an immediate picture for you in a way that entrepreneurial leadership is just less sticky.
Okay, so the start phase is 0 to 3 million.
Mm-hmm.
It's frenetic. It's messy.
Mm-hmm.
It's founder-led sales. And can you describe what the founder journey is like at this stage?
Yeah, and the thing that I'd add to that as well is for the majority of that stage, you could fit your team around one large dining room table. So kind of up to 20 people. And all the time you're in that stage, the kind of entrepreneurial leadership, that's all you really need. And it's gonna set you in really good stead. So the brave warrior entrepreneurial leadership. So if you think about a brave warrior, think about them. I always think about that scene at the beginning of Saving Private Ryan, where they're trying to charge the beach and they're trying to take the gun turret. And that brave warrior, all they're thinking about is taking the gun turret. If they get a cut or a bullet wound, they're just going to keep going. And, if their leg stops bleeding, they're just going to have a tourniquet. They're just going to keep going. Like everything is focused on this one thing, which is take the gun turret, do or die. And that's sort of that very high drive, goal orientated, almost monomaniacal focus on a goal is so helpful at startup phase, because really at that stage you are willing something into existence that hasn't existed before, and you are going to have absolutely no guidance, well, very little guidance, very little help, and you're going to make it all up, and it's just jumping out of the side of a plane with no crash pad. So that fearlessness, that comfort with risk, that willingness to kind of throw everything at a problem, that kind of courage and that bravery, you need that to get something off the ground. And even when I work with founders who may not even look like that, you kind of cut underneath the surface and they have got that absolute single-minded goal orientation. or they're buddied up and they've got a co-founder who's got there, and they're bringing in more of the thoughtful, considered architect. So it's that, single-minded, will something into existence which hasn't existed before.
What would your advice be to founders going through this phase and leading a team? Because it's quite an internal journey in terms of willing something into existence and having that level of self-belief. And what's that experience of leading a team like through the start phase?
Yeah, so I wouldn't call it a team. What I see more often than not is that at that stage you have the founder and a bunch of direct reports, and the founder is the sort of central fulcrum for everything, and has a bunch of people around them executing small pieces. So yes, it's important at that phase that the founder understands how to delegate effectively, how to scope things, how to craft clarity for their direct reports. But I don't think they need to know an awful lot about team cohesion, team dynamics at that stage. It's more they need to know how to delegate, they need to know how to give feedback. And then they need to know how to keep themselves sane. And they need to know when to stop leading like a warrior and pivot into a different style of leadership.
Well, let's talk about that. What are the signs of needing to know when to stop being a warrior?
Yeah. So I've got a couple of answers to that. The first one is if the founder thinks of themselves as skiing down a mountain. Now, if you're skiing down a mountain on your own, you don't need a plan. You don't need to follow the path. You can do whatever you like. You can if you decide as a warrior you're going to go off on this direction, go off in that direction, it's fine. If you've got 5 or 6 people behind you, it's probably still okay. If you've got 20 or 30 people behind you skiing down the hill, you need to stop being a warrior and start being considered. Because if you suddenly change the plan, set different goals, completely move, because that's the thing with that warrior stage, all that time that you're in the startup stage where you are iterating constantly, and day one, every week is a pivot as you're trying to get the product market fit right, and as you're constantly iterating on your product and listening to customer feedback, you need to be changing all the time. Once you've kind of got product market fit, or you think you've got product market fit, and now you're scaling the team and the business to deliver that product at scale. At that stage, when you move to build, you need to stop running off so many tangents on the mountain. So when your flexibility and your willingness to change starts to cause chaos is number one sign. Number two is when you're saying things like, why don't my team do things, and why is it all down to me? That's also a really good sign that you've been warrioring too much. When you are, in an ideal world, you deal with this before these problems happen, because in an ideal world, as soon as you know that you're about to go into the build phase, I would suggest you start working on building your architectural muscle. Because what I always hope that if you, part of the reason I do what I do is I'm always just thinking, here's the needs of the business, and then here's you as a founder. And most of the time, founders are running a couple of steps behind the needs of their business. So that something's breaking, they're changing it. Something doesn't work, they're fixing it. They're constantly trying to play catch up. Whereas I think if you work with somebody like us soon enough, you can get ahead, just get a couple of inches ahead of what the business needs. So you're just like on the crest of the wave rather than caught in the undertow of the wave as the business grows. So
yeah, we actually had an event with the founder of JustWorks recently, and he said, you can feel your business maturing as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what you're saying.
Precisely that.
Yeah.
So I would say as soon as you have more people than you can sit around a dining room table, as soon as you have product market fit and you're beginning to scale, as soon as you start thinking about planning, processes, systems, annual goals, project, all those kinds of things, you need to start thinking about a different style of leadership. That's probably.
Well, how do you navigate? What are the architecting muscles that you see founders are coming to you? They've just raised their A, they're sort of beginning to bring people in and around them. What are the 3 muscles that is coming
See, the interesting thing is, as soon as you say that, one of the difficulties is that it's not a binary, I'll stop warrioring and I'll start architecting. It's one of the things that I think it's so hard for founders. If you're a corporate leader, you go from being an individual contributor And then over about 15 years, you'll move through first-time manager, second-time manager, senior manager,
Very
junior
nice,
leader.
linear.
Exactly. And at
Yeah.
each stage, you're doing or you're managing or you're leading. And you'll have lots of training, lots of coaching. You'll be sent off on a nice course at Harvard. You'll watch good managers and bad managers and good leaders and bad leaders. And whereas what founders just had a good idea for a product and now gets his 50 million, go work it out. And more than that, you'll have to try to cycle between being a warrior, an architect, and a monarch multiple times every day. So, yeah, it's even more difficult than just knowing when to stop. However, the muscles you need to grow at architect phase. First thing is really understand how to elicit peak performance from your direct reports. So all the elements of understanding how to delegate, how to manage people. And I'm not suggesting that entrepreneurs become managers, because entrepreneurs don't like being managers, but they do need to understand minimally viable management practices. Minimal viable management practices. So a lot of the kickback I get from warriors, I don't want to be an architect, I'm delegating that to a COO. It's great in principle, and it's a good idea. And you will still need to be a manager about 5 to 10% of your week, because you will always need to manage your direct reports. You'll always need to engage in the management meetings that your COO has set up for the leadership team. So yes, entrepreneurs shouldn't try and become managers. However, they do need to learn minimally viable management techniques. So how do you onboard a new member of your team? How do you scope their role, make them successful? How do you coach them? How do you hold them accountable? How do you drive delivery? So all that piece of how do you elicit peak performance from one of your direct reports is a crucial skill. The second thing is, how do you get your leadership team highly engaged, working really effectively together and providing cohesive leadership to the entire organization so that everybody's pointing in the same direction? And I'm really sorry, but if no one's taught you what that involves, you don't know what that involves. And then I guess the third is really to do with managing self and others. So throughout all of that, whether it's to do with managing your direct reports, managing your investors, managing tricky customers, tricky clients, you are going to have to manage a lot of different stakeholders, and you'll have to deploy lots of different ways of managing. Sometimes you'll need to inspire audiences, other times you'll need to give tough feedback, sometimes you need to be really inspiring, sometimes you need to be really practice radical candor. And in order to do all of that, you really need to have some firm grasp of your own fears and beliefs and subconscious blocks of success. Because if your ego is getting in the way, you're not going to be able to manage any of those relationships. Mm-hmm. I know I'm still